The moment my future mother-in-law handed me her gift bag at my own bridal shower, the room exploded with laughter. 42 women stared at me as I slowly pulled out a stained kitchen apron, a bottle of cheap dish soap, a pair of yellow rubber gloves, and a handwritten note that read, "Practice now, because this is all you'll ever be good for." My face burned with humiliation. I looked toward my fiancé, expecting him to defend me. Instead, he lowered his eyes and said nothing. I honestly thought that was the worst moment of my life. I had no idea what he was carrying in the trunk of his car would leave his own mother crying before the day was over. My name is Sarah, and until that afternoon, I believed love could overcome almost anything. I grew up in a small town where my parents taught me that respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned. My father was a mechanic. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse. We never had much money, but we always had each other. When I met Ethan, I wasn't looking for a relationship. I had just opened a small graphic design business after years of freelancing. He walked into a coffee shop, carrying a laptop, and accidentally spilled his drink across my sketchbook. He apologized so many times that I actually laughed. That accident turned into dinner. Dinner became weekends together. Within 2 years, we were engaged. There was only one problem. His mother, Linda, had disliked me from the very first day. She never said it directly at first. Instead, she wrapped every insult inside a smile. "Oh, you're self-employed? That's adorable. I suppose anyone can call themselves a business owner these days. My son usually dates women from respectable families." Every gathering became another test I could never pass. If dinner tasted good, Linda would say, "Ethan always preferred my cooking." If I wore a nice dress, "It's a little flashy for someone on your income." If I stayed quiet, "She's so unfriendly." If I spoke, "She certainly enjoys attention." No matter what I did, I was wrong. Ethan always tried to keep the peace. "She's just old-fashioned. Don't let it bother you. She'll come around." But she never did. When we announced our engagement, I thought things would finally improve. Instead, they became worse. Linda suddenly wanted control over everything. The venue, the guest list, the flowers, even my wedding dress. Whenever I disagreed, she'd sigh dramatically. "I'm only trying to help." Then she'd call Ethan later and tell him I was being difficult. More than once, he asked me, "Couldn't you just let her have this one?" I started wondering whether I was marrying Ethan, or marrying into Linda's control. Still, I loved him, so I kept compromising. I paid for most of the wedding myself, because my design business had grown far more successful than anyone in his family realized. I never talked about money. I drove the same old car. I rented a modest apartment. Most people assumed I was barely getting by. I preferred it that way. Only my accountant and my attorney knew that 3 years earlier, I had quietly sold part of my company to a national marketing firm. The deal had changed my life, but I told almost no one. Money changes people. I had already seen enough of that. 2 weeks before the wedding, my maid of honor surprised me with a bridal shower. 42 women came. Friends, neighbors, co-workers, aunts, even several women from Ethan's family. The afternoon started beautifully. People laughed, shared stories, played silly games. For the first time in months, I forgot about the wedding stress. Then Linda arrived. She was nearly 40 minutes late. She walked into the room carrying an oversized gold gift bag with a giant white bow. She smiled so sweetly that I immediately became nervous. "I saved my gift for last," she announced. Everyone turned toward us. She insisted I open it in front of everyone. My hands slipped inside the tissue paper. First came the apron. Old, faded, covered with tiny grease stains. Then the dish soap. Then the yellow gloves. Finally, the handwritten card. I read it silently. Then I felt the color drain from my face. Linda stood. "Oh dear." She laughed loudly. "Read it out loud." The room became uncomfortably quiet. "I'd rather not." "Oh, don't be shy." Several women encouraged me. "Come on." I swallowed hard. Then I read the words. "Practice now. Because this is all you'll ever be good for." The silence lasted less than 2 seconds. Then someone laughed. Another joined in. Soon, nearly half the room was laughing awkwardly. Some because they thought it was a joke. Others because they didn't know what else to do. I wanted to disappear. Linda smiled proudly. "I believe every wife should know her place." One older woman actually clapped. Another whispered, "Well, she's honest." I looked toward Ethan. He had just walked through the front door after picking up decorations for the rehearsal. Dinner. He had heard everything. He looked at me, then at his mother, then at the women laughing. For one painful second, he said absolutely nothing. My heart broke. I quietly placed the apron back into the gift bag. I think I need some air. I walked outside before anyone could see me crying. I stood beside Ethan's car trying to catch my breath. A minute later he came outside. I'm sorry. I couldn't even look at him. You let them laugh. I froze. You always freeze. He had no answer. For the first time since we'd met, I wondered if marrying him was the biggest mistake of my life. He reached into the trunk of his car. I wasn't planning to do this today. What? He pulled out a large black envelope. I hoped Mom would eventually accept you. He looked back toward the house. But after what she just did, he took a deep breath. She needs to know the truth. I stared at the envelope. What truth? He looked me directly in the eyes. The one she's spent 20 years hiding from everyone. And suddenly, I realized the bridal shower wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I stared at the black envelope in Ethan's hands, completely confused. What are you talking about? I asked. He looked exhausted, like someone who had been carrying a secret for years. My mom has spent my entire life convincing everyone she's the victim, he said quietly. Today she crossed a line I can't ignore anymore. I frowned. What secret? Instead of answering, he opened the envelope. Inside were old photographs, bank statements, court documents, and a small voice recorder. My stomach tightened. Ethan, where did you get those? My dad. I froze. His father had passed away 6 years earlier. At least, that's what everyone always talked about. He left these with his attorney before he died, Ethan said. He told him to give them to me, only if Mom ever tried to destroy the woman I chose to marry. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've had this the whole time? He nodded. I prayed I'd never need it. He looked toward the house where laughter could still be heard through the windows. But today, she made her choice. Before I could stop him, Ethan walked back inside. I followed. The room became silent the moment everyone saw us. Linda smiled confidently. Feeling better? Ethan placed the black envelope on the gift table. No. His voice was calm. But I think everyone deserves a different kind of gift today. Linda laughed. What are you doing? He ignored her. Instead, he looked around the room. I've spent 32 years believing my father abandoned us because he was selfish. Linda nodded dramatically. He certainly was. Ethan slowly removed the first document. I believed that. I'll until 3 months ago. Linda's smile disappeared. Twist number 1. My father's Mauer. Force attorney contacted me after finding a storage box that Dad legally sealed before his death. Linda stood up. That's private. Ethan looked directly at her. Not anymore. He held up the first photograph. It showed his father standing beside a small apartment, holding the hand of a little boy. The room gasped. Linda smirked. Exactly. Proof he had another family. Ethan quietly shook his head. No. He turned the photo over. Everyone watched as he read the handwritten note on the back. Temporary apartment after Linda changed every lock and refused to let me see my son. The room became completely still. Twist number 2. Linda had thrown her own husband out, not the other way around. She immediately pointed toward Ethan. He's lying. Ethan calmly pressed the play button on the old voice recorder. Static filled the room. Then, his father's voice. Weak. Emotional. My son, if you're hearing this, your mother told you I abandoned you. A few women covered their mouths. I didn't. I spent 11 years fighting in court just to see you. I looked at Linda. Her face had turned pale. Twist number 3. Everything Ethan had believed about his childhood was a lie. His father's voice continued. Every birthday gift I mailed was returned unopened. Every letter came back. I never stopped trying. Several women who had laughed earlier slowly lowered their heads. Linda suddenly shouted, "Turn that off." Ethan didn't move. Instead, he pulled another folder from the envelope. Court records. He handed copies to 2 of Linda's closest friends. Their eyes moved quickly across the pages. One whispered, "Oh my God." The other looked at Linda in disbelief. Twist number 4. The judge had actually criticized Linda years earlier for repeatedly violating visitation orders. She had been warned multiple times, yet she continued hiding Ethan from his father. Linda grabbed for the papers. They're taken out of context. Ethan stepped back. No, they're certified copies. Silence. Then came another twist. I found something else. He removed a stack of cancelled checks. My father paid child support every single month. Linda crossed her arms. So? So? Ethan held up the bank records. So? The money never paid for me. Everyone looked confused. He pointed to years of luxury purchases, designer handbags, jewelry, vacations, a new sports car. Twist number 5. Linda had secretly spent Ethan's child support on herself. I heard someone quietly whisper, "That's disgusting." Linda's face grew red. "I sacrificed everything." Ethan looked heartbroken. "No, Mom. Dad did." He opened another folder. Inside were hospital bills, medical records, prescription receipts. My eyes widened. His father had been battling cancer during the final years of his life. Linda had never told Ethan. Twist number 6. She had hidden his father's illness completely. "You told me he never wanted to see me." Ethan's voice cracked. "But he wrote over 200 letters." He lifted a thick bundle tied with blue ribbon. "They're all addressed to me." Tears filled his eyes. "You never let me read a single one." Several women were crying now. The laughter from earlier had completely disappeared. One of Linda's oldest friends quietly asked, "Linda, is this true?" Linda didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she sat down slowly. For the first time all afternoon. She looked afraid. But Ethan wasn't finished. There was one last envelope. He carefully unfolded a handwritten letter. This was written 3 weeks before Dad died. His voice trembled as he read, "If my son is finally hearing this, then your mother has probably hurt another innocent person." Linda closed her eyes. "Son, don't repeat my mistake. Never stay silent when someone humiliates the person you love." I felt tears running down my face. Ethan folded the letter. Then he turned toward me. "In front of everyone, I'm sorry." His voice was shaking. "When Mom humiliated you, I stayed silent. My father stayed silent too many times before he finally fought back. He took my hands. I refused to become him." Then he looked at his mother. "You owe Sarah an apology." Linda stared at the floor. Nobody spoke. Nearly a full minute passed. Finally, she stood. Slowly. Everyone watched. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. For a second, I thought she was actually going to apologize. Instead, she pointed directly at me. "This is all your fault." The room gasped. "You turned my son against me." She grabbed her purse. "If he marries you, he'll lose his family forever." She stormed toward the door. Just before leaving, she turned back one last time. "You'll regret this marriage." The front door slammed so hard that the windows rattled. No one moved. The room was silent except for the sound of someone quietly crying. It wasn't me. It was Ethan. He stared at the unopened bundle of letters from his father, knowing he had lost 11 years that he could never get back. I wrapped my arms around him, but neither of us noticed the elderly woman standing near the fireplace. She had been silent the entire afternoon. She slowly picked up her phone, looked directly at Ethan, and said, "I think it. Finally time your grandmother learned what her daughter has been hiding for 20 years. The room was still silent when the elderly woman finished her phone call. I recognized her immediately. She was Margaret, Linda's 81-year-old aunt. Everyone in the family respected her, because she had always stayed out of arguments. If Margaret spoke, people listened. She slipped her phone into her purse and looked at Ethan. "Your grandmother is on her way." Linda's mother lived only 15 minutes away. No one expected what happened next. 20 minutes later, the front door opened again. An elderly woman walked in with a cane, her face full of confusion. Margaret said something terrible happened. She looked around the room. Then she saw the documents scattered across the table. "What is all this?" Ethan walked over and gently hugged her. "Grandma, I think Dad has finally told us the truth." She frowned. "What truth?" Without saying a word, Ethan handed her the final letter. The room became so quiet that you could hear the pages turning. As she read, tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. Then she looked toward the door where Linda had stormed out. "Oh, Linda," she whispered. "What have you done?" Twist number 7. Grandma admitted that she had believed Linda's story for more than 20 years. She had honestly thought Ethan's father had abandoned the family. "I judged that man for decades," she cried. "I never gave him a chance to explain." She looked at Ethan with overwhelming guilt. "I'm so sorry." Ethan hugged her again. Neither of them could stop crying. Just when I thought the day was finally over, Margaret quietly cleared her throat. There's something else. Everyone turned toward her. She reached into her handbag and removed a small sealed envelope. I've carried this for 6 years. My heart skipped. What is it? It was given to me by Ethan's father the week before he passed away. Ethan stared at her. You had that all this time? She nodded with tears in her eyes. He made me promise not to give it to you unless Linda refused to change. She looked around the room. I think today answered that question. Ethan carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter and a certified bank document. His eyes widened. What is this? Margaret smiled sadly. Read the letter first. His father's familiar handwriting filled the page. Son, if you're reading this, then you finally know I never stopped loving you. Everything I owned after the divorce wasn't much, but I wanted it to help you build the life you deserved, not the life built on lies. Attached to the letter was proof of a trust fund. Twist number 8. His father had quietly invested money every month for years. The account had grown to nearly $420,000. Linda had never known it existed. It belonged entirely to Ethan. He covered his mouth, overwhelmed. I thought Dad died with nothing. Margaret shook her head. He left with very little, but he made sure his son wouldn't. Several women in the room began crying again. Then my maid of honor walked over to me. I think you should see this. She handed me my phone. It was exploding with notifications. Someone had secretly recorded Linda humiliating me during the bridal shower. The video had already spread across social media. Thousands of people were commenting. Most weren't laughing. They were defending me. Twist number 9. By the next morning, Linda's own country club asked her to resign from its charity committee after members saw the video. Several local organizations quietly distanced themselves from her. The humiliation she had tried to force on me had come back to her in a way she never expected. 3 days later, there was one final surprise. Linda asked to meet us. Not at her house, not at a restaurant, at the cemetery where Ethan's father was buried. When we arrived, she was already standing beside the headstone. She looked completely different. No expensive jewelry, no designer clothes, just a woman who looked exhausted. For a long time, nobody spoke. Finally, Linda looked at Ethan. I've spent years blaming everyone except myself. She wiped away tears. I hated your father because he moved on after our marriage fell apart. She took a deep breath. And I convinced myself that hurting him would somehow make me feel better. She looked at me. But all I really did, was hurt my own son. Then she did something I never imagined. She turned toward me. I'm sorry, Sarah. My gift wasn't a joke. It was cruelty. I wanted to embarrass you because I was afraid you'd become more important to Ethan than I was. She began crying. I was wrong. For the first time since I had known her, there were no excuses, no manipulation, no blame, only regret. I accepted her apology, not because she deserved it, but because I refused to let bitterness become part of my marriage. A month later, Ethan and I had the wedding we almost canceled. It wasn't the extravagant celebration Linda had wanted. It was small, simple, filled with people who genuinely loved us. During the reception, Ethan stood to make a toast. He smiled at me before looking around the room. When Sarah was humiliated at her bridal shower, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I stayed silent. He reached for my hand. I'll never make that mistake again. The room erupted in applause. Even Linda was crying. After the wedding, we used part of the trust fund to create something that would have made Ethan's father proud. We started a scholarship in his name for young adults who had grown up in broken families and wanted to build better futures. Every year, when we meet the students whose lives have been changed by that scholarship, I think about that ugly gift bag, the apron, the gloves, the bottle of dish soap. Linda meant them to remind me of my place. Instead, they reminded me of something much more important. Your worth is never decided by the people who try to humiliate you. Sometimes the people who laugh the loudest are hiding the biggest lies. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't shouting back. It's standing beside the person you love, watching the truth come into the light, and building a happier life than your enemies ever believed you deserved.